Do you want to kick off with a highlight from the past year that you were thinking about?
Yes. Okay. I'll just take the first one on my
Yeah,
list.
yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. So the first highlight I wanted to talk about this year was a Singapore-based client. They're launching into the Australian market, and they came to us looking for a partner that can help them create the right sort of content, both from a content marketing, inbound marketing perspective, but also from an SEO perspective. And so we've been working with them now for just over 4 months. So far, we've published a white paper, landing page, 10 blog posts, 12 social cards. There's emails gone out to a database which we help them develop for their market entry. And the feedback's been really positive. They're a security vendor. As I say, they're international. The office is based in Singapore. They're really using this as an opportunity to start to build some awareness for their brand, start to get some activity happening, and obviously generate some lead flow. And they've been really happy with the results so far. So that's been a great highlight for me to be able to work with a large international company that's wanting to come into the Australian market, that's looking for a partner that understands not only the dynamics of the B2B technology market, but also can produce the right sort of content for SEO and for inbound that's going to generate the results that they're looking for. So that's been a great project to work on, and looking forward to continuing the success into 2024 with them.
I think what's really cool about that particular market entry into Australia, we're so accustomed to working with vendors and larger channel programs where there's an existing presence, but they're looking to try to figure out how do they scale up locally, how do they enable their partners in region, and how do they go beyond having sales enablement or marketing enablement content that's produced in the States, and how do they
Hmm.
make it locally relevant? So I think the work that's happening with the Singapore-based client is really cool, as it's effectively fresh brand entry and really trying to generate demand locally. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's been a fun project to work on. And the type of software that they produce is pretty heavy duty security software based around identity. Zero trust is a key component of that. I could tell that when we first started working together, they were testing us out in terms of our ability to create content that works to those more hardcore topics. Let's say these are the sort of topics which are going to appeal to a CISO, to a security operations center type profile. But I think with the process that we go through with our writers and our briefing processes, actually been really nailing it. And the feedback that we're getting back on the content that we produce is really quite minimal. And so it's been a great process to go through that together. And I think from a Filament perspective, increase our capabilities, increase the knowledge of our team and our writers, and give them the opportunity to work on some different topics as well. So it's been a really great project all round.
I think you've highlighted another point for me that has really become prominent this year, in that our larger clients, as they first start getting to know us, are pretty concerned that we're not a large advertising agency. And they're concerned around our capacity and capability. And when they then start working with us and realize the speed to market that we're producing content, it's pretty eye-opening for them, and I feel like that's happened with that particular client, as well as a range of other multinationals and other vendors, where the team's just able to start sprinting immediately and produce content, compelling, meaningful content in a way that, and at a pace that they've not seen elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the way that we work. That's the way that we like to interact with our clients. But I think also from the Filament perspective, I think we've been very purposeful in making sure that we've set up the systems and processes
Mm.
and the resources in terms of the people that are operating those processes, that's really set up that we want to be responsive, that we want to be exceeding expectations rather than disappointing them. So that's, I think, part of our DNA as an agency and the real value that we provide.
Speaking of the value, one of the things that I think has been fantastic in this past year is, very early on in the year, we found out, or maybe it was the back end of 2022, I can't remember the exact date, but when we found out that we won Best Content Marketing in Australia
Yeah.
for the go-to-market we did with VMware and AU Cloud launching effectively the company deeper down into their infrastructure as a service and their data sovereignty and a whole bunch of other stuff. Workspace ONE. Uh, Coming off the back of that award, we've just been leveling up time and time again, just in terms of the size of business we're working with, the size of the go to market,
Mm.
and the types of projects that we're owning and delivering. It's been really rewarding to reflect back on.
Yeah, I think so. And it's also interesting that campaign that we won the award for, the SEMrush award for. I mean, that was a go-to-market campaign, and one of
Mm.
the things that you and I have really focused on, I think, this year, and even more focused probably looking forward into 2024, is how do we build out our capability, because we think that's a really unique part of our offering in terms of offering a go-to-market service for tech vendors and tech brands that are looking to go into a new market. As I talked about with the Singapore client that we've been working with, we'll launch a new product or service. And you've got a great example of something that you've been working on, and actually even extending into that joint go-to-market where there's a number of different either vendor brands or vendor and channel partner brands working together to jointly go to market. And I'm really excited to see the opportunity that's going to open up for us. I think it's, as I said, an area where there's maybe not the same focus or the same capability as we think that we're developing. But I'd love to hear, Jeremy, your sort of thoughts about how you see our go-to-market proposition evolving and maturing through 2024.
Yeah, so we've really been reflecting on this quite a bit, haven't we?
Mm,
It's a frame and it's a lens of work that we've been doing since founding the company, and in fact, prior to this iteration of the company, where we've already been doing this. We've been enabling business leaders to be very effective and efficient in how they're launching new services or taking new products to market. And a lot of times that's in the context of their partner vendor or multiple vendors.
mm,
And I think a real game changer for us as a company this year was the project that you led, where we effectively were the backbone to Beam and AWS's alliance in the APAC region, enabling partners to take data protection services to market or to expand their footprint, but doing that from the context of having multiple brand stories to tell
mm.
and weaving that into a story that makes sense for the partner's brand. That takes magic and real nous and know how to understand how to do that. And because we did that at scale for a large number of partners across multiple regions, you'll have to remind me, was it 6, 7 territories? It was
Yeah.
pretty widespread.
Yeah.
Multilingual, in fact. That was
Mm.
another thing we leveled up on in our content, now that we're publishing multiple languages.
Yeah.
You'll have to
Yeah.
remind me, I think Bahasa,
And Thai.
uh, Thai,
Yeah.
and there was a third, I think. Was there?
Yeah.
I can't
No,
remember.
just those two, just those
Those
two.
2.
But yeah,
Yeah.
look, and what you're talking about, we're taking a service to market with Veeam and AWS in Thailand with a Thai partner. All of the material produced in Thai. That was a lot of work and a lot of effort to get it all lined up, but ultimately really successful. Ultimately, we're bringing together the two propositions, creating a unique message around the partners' data protection capability, and doing it for their market in the language that works for that market. Yeah, it was quite something to work on.
And what was really rewarding is for us to recently get feedback from alliance director and sales teams that the project was so successful and efficient. And when are we going to do it again? And we're saying, tell us when we're ready to
Yeah.
go. But that was really rewarding. And just going back to your question, that was a real level up because of how challenging telling that partner marketing story with so many brands involved in the same story. Most business leaders aren't thinking about the sheer amount of red tape that has to go through from a
Yeah.
compliance and legal perspective, from a brand sign off perspective, and dealing with multiple layers of the marketing organization within multiple organizations.
Mm.
That was a real level up. And I'm really looking forward to continuing that as we move forward into this go to market space.
Yeah, agree, agree. I also touched on there, and what I've just been talking about as an example of going to market with two brands and a partner. And you've been through something very similar, probably maybe even more intense, the one go to market, but a lot more moving parts. What would be, and maybe just tell us a little bit about that, but also can you pull out kind of the key learning for you as you went through that process?
Yeah, and I think we can speak quite openly about this. This is a go-to-market for Probax, which is a VCSP in the Veeam ecosystem. They pivoted this year when they sold off their services side of the business to ThinkOn out of Canada. ThinkOn's now got an Australian presence, which is super cool as they're entering the region. Probax is pivoting to a SaaS only business. They are deep in with Veeam, and they were utilizing Veeam's launch of their V12 and more recently honed in their 12.1 around direct to object storage capability. And so Wasabi is the third partner in that piece, having the ability to have affordable storage on the back end to store Microsoft data or any other backups from end user businesses. So that's been really rewarding over the recent couple of months, building out that go-to-market framework, getting sales teams and executives at every level of all of those organizations involved, channel executives, channel sales, channel marketing, engineers, and many others are involved. So that's now launched. It's launched in Australia, New Zealand, and is about to launch even further in the US as distribution goes live. I think that sort of reflects and really solidifies where we've been moving as a company to be able to be the point person on that from right across all of those teams, ensuring that everybody's on the same page, that value propositions are tightly defined. And that's a piece of work that you've really been owning with a lot of our clients as well, around how you're differentiating meaningfully in a way that can be understood by prospective buyers, and seeing that right through all of the go-to-market collateral, and then being able to deliver and implement on that
Mm,
as well. We're able to bring that full end to end, which is a little bit different. And this is another success that we found out this year, but it's a little bit different when we launched the Cirrus Backup brand a couple of years ago, and you ran that one.
mm,
That was too successful, and then they backed away from us because they didn't need us anymore, which I laughingly celebrate as well,
mm,
because of course we would have liked to have worked with them ongoing, but if they don't need us, that's great. But then to find out that Veeam had acquired Cirrus this year, and which is hilarious because we also do a lot of work with Veeam, and it all just stays within the family, as jokingly mentioned. But yeah, that having the ability to implement on an ongoing basis with this current project is going to be really exciting. And I think that's, we're really setting up the next 12, 24 months of scale up for this go to market.
And with that go to market, with that launch, I guess you were bringing together three different company messaging. From the Veeam perspective, it's all about their superior technology and their ability to offer data protection at scale. From a Wasabi perspective, it's presumably about the quality of their storage and the fact that it can become immutable. And then from the Probax perspective, they're looking at we're really innovating around the availability of those services and bringing them together. So three quite different, complementary, but different sets of messaging. How did you get all of the cats to kind of play nicely together?
Yeah, there's some herding of the cats that takes place.
Yeah.
And I think it gets complicated because businesses aren't accustomed to that level of rigor or detail of planning,
Mm,
potentially.
mm,
And so there's a journey involved to understand how are we negotiating this. But I really feel that we as an agency and the IP that we have been developing our owning can help smoothen that process
mm,
by just our volume of experience and expertise that we've gained to figure out how do we massage and weave these things together in a way that is compelling. I think we're in a space where this is so far beyond just a simple checklist, and the level of strategy required to get people on side and to agree, even down to the individual wording on a media release,
mm,
just takes effort. And maybe now that I'm reflecting on it as well while we're talking, Also a real sense of the unified team. I think
Yeah.
it's as long there's a point where people can come together and really see that there's a collective vision, and when people are collaborating truly, not necessarily just trying to fight to win something, but understanding that the mutual benefit is going to be far greater than anyone on their own, you can arrive at something that's going to make sense for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. No, fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It's just as you're talking, a key part of, I think, what you're describing, what you went through is developing out that value proposition. And in that instance, it's really the value proposition that's bringing together almost three different value propositions. And, I think that's one thing that as an agency, we do particularly well. I was with a client a couple of months ago and had been asked to come in for a workshop, basically to help them define the value proposition for their go to market. So they're an Australian based business that helps manage complex technical integrations for managed service providers. So they'll provide a capability that managed service providers don't have if they want to offer particular types of services to their clients. And so went into this workshop and there was a couple of people there, importantly, the MD of the business. And I kind of went through the process that I go through in these situations. And I could tell from his body language and his feedback that he was, I'm not going to say resistant, but he was almost like why am I here? Why am I bothering with this? But pressed on. As we got to the end of the part of the workshop, we were really defining the value proposition. That's something that we just do collaboratively in the workshop. It was almost like a light bulb went off for him. And he leaned forward and he said, Nick, I have to tell you that I've sat in about 3 or 4 of these types of meetings over the last year, a couple of years, and all of them have been a waste of time. And I just thought, oh no,
Mm.
here we go.
Here it comes. Yeah.
I'll get ready to leave now. But then he said, no, but hold on. My real problem is none of my engineers, and they really pride themselves in this business on their technical capability, none of my engineers can actually say exactly what it is we do. But what we've just done together, I can now hand to each of our technical teams and say, read that and you will understand what we do. And that was just so gratifying to get that feedback because we've designed this process around looking at how do we describe what we do, why we do it, and how we do it better than anyone else. And just turning that into a relatively pithy statement or value proposition. And by going through that process, it was like, as I say, the light went on for him. And he was like, because of this process, I've now got this great clear messaging about how we can actually, as a business, be much clearer about what we're trying to achieve. And that's something that I hadn't thought about necessarily before with regard to value propositions. Maybe I'm too focused on it in terms of a marketing or a go-to-market perspective. And that's got to be what drives all of the messaging that we use externally. But actually, what the MD pointed out is that messaging is just as valuable internally because it really helps to describe in pretty clear, unambiguous terms, what it is that you're all there to do, why you turn up in the morning, why you keep taking the salary from them and not going to someone else. That was a great learning that I had just on the value of the value proposition as a true unlock across the business.
I think what's really powerful about what you're describing is the ability to refine how to even talk about the purpose of the
Mm,
business. We work with in the space that we sit. A lot of the businesses that we're exposed to are IT services types, and system integrators, and value-added resellers, and a lot of these are pretty mature businesses. They've been around 10, 20 years. They're doing really well from a revenue perspective. They'd like to do better, of course, but they've grown this off the back of delivering good services. They've
mm,
never really needed to think about what is it that we're actually solving for people. And it's usually reflected in doing the implementation of the service, keeping the lights on and keeping things secure, but it's never really the business value. And that's been an interesting shift in
yeah,
conversation as the leaders that we're exposed to are recognizing the value of that.
yeah, yeah. I think as well, there's an interesting inflection point that businesses as they scale will inevitably go through. And especially in people centered businesses, but not just that, is that you can have the founder or the MD and then the let's call them the head of sales or the chief commercial person, whatever their title is. you can grow the business a long way based on their networks, on
Mhm.
their outreach, on their activity. But there comes a point where that just doesn't scale. You can add more salespeople, but they're not going to have as good a network, or they're not going to be they're not going to have that ability to actually work their network to create the opportunities for themselves. And that's the situation with the client that I was just talking about, but also something that we've come across even in, as you say, mature businesses. There comes a point where if you really want to keep growing, you need to be doing far more of that heavy lifting on a digital perspective, which I think really is where some of our value proposition and other services come into play, because that
Mm,
gives you a language that is common, consistent, understood, that really recognizes the value that you as a business bring, that you're able to communicate at much greater scale through digital means. That's one of the other unlocks for that whole value proposition process.
yeah, yeah, it's been a good year.
Mm, it has. It has. I was thinking as well, ju- sometimes just about another client,
Mm,
New Zealand based client, and sometimes you're brought into an opportunity to do one thing, but by going through the process, you recognize that actually to really help the client, you need to be doing something else. So just to describe, a large technology firm in New Zealand, one of the leading couple of players in their category. Again, they have literally been around for 20 plus years. Well, the 20th anniversary is next month. And they had implemented HubSpot. They'd had an agency that had come in and helped them do the implementation. They've been through the onboarding process with them, but they basically were paying several $1,000s a year for a tool that didn't really work for them. No one owned, and they didn't really understand how to get the value out of. So through an introduction through one of our partners in New Zealand, we were introduced into this business and started the process, the journey with them by doing an audit on their HubSpot installation. They had both marketing and sales professional subscriptions. And so we went through the process with them of doing that audit, understanding were there any gaps in the setup? And yes, there were some technical capabilities that were not implemented correctly. There were some, let's call it branding related items that weren't implemented correctly. But most importantly, I think one of the biggest unlocks of something like HubSpot when we talk about scaling is that it gives you that ability to categorize your database, categorize leads into different groups depending on where they are in terms of their relationship with you, or where they are in the sales and marketing funnel, if we want to be technical about it. And this business hadn't implemented that. And so by going through and understanding that they hadn't done that, and then working with them to see how we could implement that and understand when someone goes from a prospect to a lead, to a marketing qualified lead, to a sales qualified lead. Actually, what we uncovered was that there was a disconnect, let's call it, between the marketing led processes and the sales led processes. The sales team were actually probably pretty happy with how they were using the software, but it really didn't connect up with what the marketing team were trying to achieve. And there wasn't that overlap. So there was no elegant handoff between marketing to say, here's a lead that we've qualified as far as we can. We think they're a great opportunity. Now you, sales team, you go and run with that. And so by going through the audit process and then looking at what we needed to do to rectify the issues that were uncovered, there was, of course, all of the technical level things, but most importantly for the business, there was this recognition of the needed to be a far better process to manage a lead from beginning, from a stranger through to a sale. How can we support, given our knowledge on what's going to work well from the marketing perspective, from the marketing side of the funnel, and then really tying that up with the sales side of the funnel. And it was great. That was, of course, not what we were contracted to do at all, but that's what we ended up spending a lot of time with, because really recognizing that was where the greatest unlock was going to be for the business. It's not about the tool. It's about how people work together. It's about having the processes to make sure that together the sales and marketing teams can be really successful.
yeah, I think that was an amazing learning, particularly as we are expanding out how and where we deploy support around marketing automation
Yep.
and centralizing information and helping businesses scale up their marketing efforts when they generally have pretty small marketing teams or even just a single individual. So that piece right there was an awesome unlock for the business itself and also gave us a better understanding of the meaningful value of what we're doing, bringing that end-to-end visibility from stranger through to closed deal.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. I also, just finally from me, thought
Yeah.
about three great learnings that I've had this year. I just wanted to share them with you, get your reaction, because one of the things that I love about doing what we do is I'm learning all the time. That's really important. It keeps me kind of young despite the grey in the beard. And so I thought I thought as I've been reflecting on this year and the things that have really stood out for me, I thought there's three that I'd feedback to you. First of all, start with the value proposition. We've talked about this already, but you really can't do anything consistently without that value proposition that guides all of your messaging. That means that you're consistent. That means that everyone has the same features, benefits, and differentiation to be talking about. The second thing is, especially in the technology space, but broadly, I think in B2B, no one ever buys a product. They buy a solution to a problem, or they buy a solution to a job that they have to do. Let's continue to switch that around and talk about what's the problem first, and then we can talk about the product, because that's how the buying process works. And then the third thing, and this has been something that maybe has been reflected through in our discussion from Filament perspective, from an agency perspective, don't be a supplier, be a partner. I've had a number of instances where if I was a supplier, I'd just shut up and wouldn't say anything. But because I see myself as a partner to the businesses that we work with, I've said things which may be not that popular, but is the advice that I believe that we should be giving, because that's going to help our partners get the best out of the opportunities that they've got. So they're my three big learnings. Start with the value proposition, not about the product, and be a partner for the businesses that you work with.
Awesome.